With you this morning. I appreciate your presence here in person and also those who may be watching online. We appreciate you. And it's exciting for Marvina and I to be back home. We had a good trip to the Freed Hardeman Lectures in Henderson, Tennessee. When we left week before last, we thought maybe we were going to hit some bad weather because they were calling for a lot of ice down that way, but it was mainly just rain all the way down through Virginia and across Tennessee. Sometimes it was raining cats and dogs, but that's an expression. It's like the salesman who comes to the door, and the lady answers the door, and there's a barking dog there with the lady. And so he backs up, and she says, "Oh, don't worry. You've heard the expression, a barking dog never bites." And he said, "Well, I know that expression. You know that expression. I just hope your dog knows that expression." But anyway, it was raining hard, but no snow, no sleet, nothing like that. So we were very fortunate. Had a good week, and it's great to be home. I have two books here that will be presented to the church library today after our services. This is the lectureship book for the year. It's called He Went About Doing Good, The Compassion of Christ in Luke. The lecture is February 6th through 10th in the year 2022, and it's inscribed as follows: "To all of our brethren at the Central Church of Christ, Martinsburg, West Virginia, with gratitude for your faithfulness, encouragement, support, and every act of your kindness and compassion toward us, Bob and Marvina Vale, February 13th, 2022. And then this is the companion volume. This is something new this year. They've started publishing a ladies' study book. This is called Compassion and Service, the Heart and Hand of the Messiah. So these will go into the church library. This is a lesson book that would be appropriate for a ladies' class or something similar. And it is similarly inscribed in the front. I hope those will be very helpful and that you'll enjoy looking through those. I'm going to make a little change of plans here today. I had planned to present this lesson all in one shot this morning and then get into our study of John this evening. But all things considered, I think rather than rush this, we're going to just make this a two-parter this morning. Okay, and so we're going to postpone our study of John to begin, Lord willing, next Sunday. But this morning, I want to invite you to think with me about something that we discussed during the lectures. And it has to do with growing up like Jesus. This is especially for our young people. But really, it's for all who have any influence with young people as well, whether you are a parent, a grandparent, a great-grandparent, maybe you are just a good friend to some young people in your life who might appreciate some thoughtful guidance from the Word of God. Because to me, this is a fascinating statement that Brother Danny just read for us there from Luke 2:52, where the text says, "Then Jesus advanced in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and men." Luke chapter 2 and verse 52. When you think about the fact that Jesus was the Son of God, God incarnate, okay, how could he advance in wisdom, say? Isn't God already all-knowing? Or how could God advance or increase in favor with God? Thoughtful questions based upon a very thoughtful verse in Luke chapter 2, verse 52. Well, when you think about it, of course, we recognize that Jesus was not born full grown. We sometimes think that Jesus came into this earth ready to launch immediately into his mission, all completely grown and developed. But we know physically that he went through a period from being a baby, a young man at age 12 there in that passage, and then on growing into an adult. He wasn't born fully grown physically. He was not born fully developed socially. You know, social development comes from practice. It comes from experience, interacting with other people, to advance in favor with men, as Jesus did. He was not born with complete wisdom. Remember that the word wisdom is different from the word knowledge. Well, what is wisdom? Wisdom, James would tell us, is the proper use of knowledge. It's one thing to have a lot of book learning. It's another thing to put it to a practical and wise use in a wise manner. That's wisdom. And so he was not born in full favor with the Father. There would be some things that he would need to do, to accomplish, and to develop along that road. And so it was necessary for him to advance in wisdom and stature in favor with God and in favor with men, Luke 2:52. The similar verse to this is Luke chapter 2 and verse 40, which says, "And the child grew and waxed strong, filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him." That is in the same chapter, just a few verses earlier, as you heard from Luke 2:40. And the phrase "filled with" there literally means becoming full of. So Jesus was going through a process of filling up with wisdom, becoming full of wisdom. It's interesting that Luke covers a 12-year period with that one sentence. There's really not much that we know. We might wish that we knew a lot more about those 12 years, but Luke gives us what we need in one sentence. The child grew and waxed strong, filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. And there's only one incident recorded, which was the incident there at the temple, as was read, verses 41 through 50. But that one incident gives us a great insight into who we're dealing with. Tells us a lot about Jesus Christ and what he was like even as a young man at 12 years of age. There was a gospel preacher back in the prior century by the name of J.S. Lamar who was dealing with this particular verse in a commentary that he wrote. And you may have the commentary. It's in the Gospel Light series. Maybe you have that particular series. And the quotation that he gives here, I think, is very enlightening. He says, "The fact that he increased in wisdom shows that his inner being, like his outer, was subject to human conditions. His understanding, even as a child, excited the wonder of the wisest men, but still he listened to them, asked them questions as a learner, and acquired knowledge by the use of means. Had it been otherwise, had the child been miraculously endowed with that perfect wisdom which characterized him as a man, it had not only been unseemly, but it had raised him above our human sympathies. And we should have lost in trustful fellowship more than we gained in wonder. Let us be thankful that he was like us, that he increased in wisdom by studying the Word and the works of God, and by humble prayer and meditation, that measure by measure the Spirit was given to him." There's another quote that I had found that I'd like to share with you from the New International Commentary on the New Testament that I think sort of sums up this idea of how this could be with Jesus. On page 129, he says, "But whatever was precisely done and experienced by Jesus during these years, we know from this verse that Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. He passed through a natural but perfect spiritual and physical development." Now watch this. At every stage, he was perfect for that stage. But there's a big difference between the perfection of a child and that of an adult. The difference between perfect innocence and perfect holiness. I think those quotations help us to see how this could be that Jesus could increase in wisdom as well as in favor with God. There's a few other verses that you might compare to this in thought. The same kind of principle. For example, in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 17, where Jesus says, "Think not that I came to destroy the law and the prophets." I came not to destroy, but to fulfill. Jesus says his purpose in coming was to fulfill the law and the prophets. He came to fulfill. His mission was not immediately completed. There was work for him to do. And you know something? He could have rejected that mission. He could have said, you know what, there's some beautiful scenery around Nazareth here. I like this part of the world. I'm just going to take a hiatus. I'm going to go for a vacation. I'm going to forget about what my Father told me to do. I was going to pursue my own interests, but he didn't do that. He could have rejected his mission, but he did not. He came and began immediately, set out to accomplish the reason he had come. John 17, you remember when Jesus is praying there in the Garden of Gethsemane just before his crucifixion? Makes an interesting statement in that prayer to the Father. He says, "I glorified thee on the earth, having accomplished the work which thou hast given me to do." Having accomplished the work. Was Jesus perfectly accomplished when he started? No. He came to accomplish that work. His work was not immediately accomplished. He could have rejected that work. He could have said, you know, I'm not going to put up with this anymore. This is frustrating. Why not go out and enjoy myself for the next 3 years? But he did not do that. He accomplished the work that was set before him to do. Here's another passage from Hebrews chapter 2, the 10th verse. "For it became him, for whom are all things, and through whom are all things, to make the author of their salvation perfect through sufferings." Hebrews chapter 2 and verse 10. To make the author of their salvation perfect through sufferings. Was Jesus perfect in that sense when he first came? Before the sufferings? Well, the Hebrew writer says he needed to pass through these sufferings in order to be made perfect or complete. So, Jesus came to author salvation. His saving work was not immediately accomplished. He was not immediately qualified, but he became qualified. He became perfected through the things that he suffered. And then this one, perhaps clearest of all, from Hebrews chapter 5, verses 8 and 9. The writer says, "Though he was a son, yet learned he obedience by the things which he suffered. And having been made perfect, he became unto all them that obey him the author of eternal salvation." You see how Jesus came to author salvation, once again. His saving work was not immediately accomplished. He was not immediately perfect or complete, but he went through a process of suffering, and that experience qualified him. The writer says he learned obedience by the things which he suffered. I think all of these verses show us that it was possible for Jesus to do that. Not easy. To be both God and man and to fulfill all of the attributes necessary in each role to be our model, our inspiration, and our guide in life. But now, in the few moments that remain, let's ask this question. How did Jesus do it? Young people, how do you increase in wisdom and in favor with God? I'm not particularly worried right now about increasing in stature because that's going to pretty much come. It's going to almost come automatically to most people. I'm not going to focus on that or increasing in favor with men because you're going to handle that aside from these scriptural principles here this morning. I want us to focus on how do young people increase in wisdom and in favor with God. And if you have children of your own, you're here this morning with your young children, which is admirable. You got up and you looked out the window and you said, oh, it's snowing. I'm not going to go to church today. No, what you did, you may not realize you did this, but you thought, I've got children. I need the Lord, and so do they. I am going to steer my life in a way that is pleasing to God, and I'm going to do my dead level best to serve Him and to raise children who will do likewise. Now, that isn't a guarantee, that's not a promise. You may have launched out on your way to services this morning and spun out in the snow and not been able to make it. Fortunately, the roads were kind of wet, but it really didn't amount to too much, most places. But there are, plans can be thwarted. I get that. You may do a superb job raising your children. They may still go astray. I get that. But still, there must be some keys, some principles when you look at Jesus and how He managed to do this that would be helpful for us. So in wrestling with that, I came up with some scriptures and some keys. I'm going to give them to you. I'm going to give you the keys now. There's a picture of a key there. That's a key to a 1959 Ford, okay? I'm going to give you the keys to the car now, and then you're on your own. Number one, there are 7 of these. Jesus Christ knew by faith several unseen things. That was a crucial key to His ability to advance, spiritually speaking. If you want to help your children get to heaven, you must help them to see some things that are not visible with the human eyes, physical eyesight. He knew by faith. It's like Abraham. Remember in Hebrews chapter 7 where we studied not too long ago? Verse 10 says, for he, Abraham, looked for the city which hath the foundations, whose builder and maker is God. What's he talking about? He's talking about heaven. He looked for that city. Was he able to see it with his eyes? No, but he could see it. That's what kept him focused and on track throughout his life. He was able to see that by faith. Or Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 13. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them and greeted them from afar. Can you see the promises of God? I know whom I have believed, and am persuaded that He's able to keep that which I've committed unto Him against that day. Can you see Him? Can you see heaven, your eternal home? In Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11, God says, this is the English Standard Version, for I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. How old are you, young people? How many years do you have to live? Can you see that God is able to see the answers to those questions? And He says, I know the plans that I've got for you. to give you a future and a hope. Well, God is able to see that, and so must we. That's what Jesus was able to do. Now that ties into this second key. Here it is. Jesus Christ understood his purpose and his mission in life. He got it. He realized, I'm not here by accident. Now listen to me carefully, young people. I don't know what your science teachers are teaching you in school. I don't know exactly what you have been taught in biology. I do know what is being taught in some of our public schools these days, and it ain't good. I know what's being taught in some of the textbooks. Whether your teacher is using that textbook and relying on it or not, I don't know. But you are not here by accident. You are not here as a result of a series of coincidences that just happened. And Jesus got that. He understood why he was here, that there was a purpose to his life, a mission to accomplish. Back in 1 Kings chapter 18, we've studied recently in Brother Don teaching about Elijah. You remember when Elijah, so frustrated with the people and their constant vacillation, finally cries out to them in 1 Kings chapter 18 and verse 21. He said, came near unto all the people and he said, "How long go ye limping between the two sides? If Jehovah be God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. Stop the fence riding." That's what Elijah is saying. Joshua would put it this way: "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." The decision is made. He understood his purpose and his mission in life. One of the problems that we are facing in American culture today is that we have a lot of people who have been taught to believe that it's all just pure chance and accident. And when you think about the ramifications of that, how that affects a person's decisions in everyday life, it truly is a scary prospect for the future of our land. But that's not the way the Bible reads. And Jesus recognized that he had a purpose in living, that he had a mission in life. There's a passage in 1 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 4, which I would also like to read to you from the English Standard Version for this morning. It says, "Nor to devote themselves to myths and endless genealogies which promote speculations, rather than the stewardship from God that is by faith." What's Paul talking about there? Well, he is describing how it is important for members of the church, and he was talking specifically about certain members who were prone to fall into these endless disputes. He calls them endless genealogies. Do you ever try to track your family tree? I mean, if you can track that thing far enough, it's going to get complicated, let me tell you. And that's the picture that Paul is painting here. Endless genealogy. It's like taking a spider web and trying to trace out every single strand. And for what? These endless genealogies that Paul was talking about were profitless debates and discussions about things that didn't really matter. How much time are you spending on Facebook in endless genealogies and disputes that profit nothing? Now again, Facebook has its good uses. I get that. But there is a tendency that Paul recognized to fall into getting off purpose, off track, and getting wrapped up in a lot of things that really don't matter. And that brings up the third point, the third key, if you will. Jesus, through practical use, was able to convert his knowledge into wisdom. Converting knowledge into wisdom. Now, please do not misunderstand what I'm about to say. You know that I'm not against formal education. In fact, I've kind of invested pretty heavily in that myself. Formal education is a good thing. Book learning. But philosophical knowledge and book learning will only take us so far, folks. We must at some point put it into practice through practical application. And that takes wisdom. Wisdom is the proper use of knowledge. And Jesus was the master at that. I don't read about Jesus acquiring a lot of book learning, but I'm sure that he did. I'm sure that he was a good Bible student. He must have spent many hours as a young man studying, learning the Word of God, so that he could competently and ably discuss it and even debate it with the religious leaders of his day. But it didn't stop there. He put it into practice. He converted his knowledge into wisdom. Paul talked about those in 2 Timothy 3 and verse 7 who were ever learning and never able to come to a knowledge of the truth. I mean, they had more doctor's degrees than a fevered patient, but they could never get to the point where they put it into practice. Ever learning and never able to come to or to arrive at the knowledge of the truth. I'm going to introduce the fourth point just in closing here, and then, Lord willing, this evening I'll give you the other keys here. But think about this today, if you would, this afternoon, in between the other activities of your day. Jesus made the most of the limited time that he was given. I asked you a question, young people, how much time do you have? If someone had asked Jesus that question, his answer, if he knew the chronology, which I'm convinced that he did, he knew that his time was very limited. If our information is correct, Jesus didn't live beyond 30, maybe 33 years of age on this earth. And yet, look at the impact that he made. When I was in high school, I had a buddy by the name of Kenny Schwab. We played tennis on a Thursday at the school tennis court. I said, "See you, Kenny." The next day, he was in a car crossing a railroad track. And that, for whatever reason, that train struck that car and he was killed just like that. 17, 18 years old. Snatched into eternity. It hit me, maybe more than it had ever before. Even young people do not have a guarantee of tomorrow. Jesus knew that the shadows were darkening. The cross was looming a short distance ahead. His time was limited. I got to get busy. I've got to be about my Father's business. And he made the most of the limited time that he had. So this afternoon, as you are living your day and your afternoon, think about that. Think about the fact that we don't have unlimited opportunities. We have precious little time. James said that our life is but a vapor. It appears for a little while and then vanisheth away. And as we get a little older, we begin to realize just how precious little that time really is. If you're here this morning thinking, I see the life of Jesus Christ. I want to be that kind of a young person. I want to make a difference in this world. I want to live my life pleasing to my Heavenly Father. You can do that. While time and opportunity is still yours, step out in obedience. If you have not yet been baptized into Christ for the remission of your sins, this may be very well the time for you to address that particular need right now. If you've done that but have wandered away and have not been faithful as Jesus Christ was faithful, why not come back? Why not grow like Jesus Christ, advancing in wisdom and in favor with God? If we can assist you so to do, would you come?